Hi everyone, it's a great pleasure to be speaking to you all today from the virtual stage. I'm Charles, co-founder of The Food People, and I'll be introducing you to the top 10 trends of influence for 23-24. And for Trend Hub subscribers, I'll be pointing you in the direction of the granular detail that you can find on the Trend Hub platform and be able to access from today. So what is our global driver for 23-24? Well, our overarching global driver is one that we've called under pressure. We're living in a less stable world where people are struggling to maintain control of their health, their finances. They're looking to take direct action to relieve that pressure. In these more strained times, ways to help food to become more healthy, affordable and accessible are being more and more widely sought after. We're also embracing the humble as a more worthy option, brands and products which can also help us to regain that sense of control in our lives in terms of health and cost saving using innovation are also widely welcomed. As a way out from this difficult world, we conversely look for distractions which can take us away from all of this. Experiences which can displace us into another world of sensory enjoyment have a heightened appeal in these times. In preparing our 23-24 Master Food and Drink framework, we've taken many thousands of hours of research. Our understanding of how society and consumers behave, combine that with our expertise in industry, in gastronomy and the human sciences, to use this as a prelude to the future horizon, combined with our sense-making frameworks, and that's how this manifests itself on the screen. The 23-24 Trends Framework is made up of one global driver, 4 social and cultural forces, 12 food and beverage megatrends, and 64 trend manifestations. And if you're a Trend Hub subscriber, you'll be able to explore the granular detail and the intricacies and the nuances of the framework in more detail than ever before, with more supporting videos and other platform-based assets. This framework is designed to make sense of that future horizon and seed the future business opportunities that lay within it. But today, we'll be focusing on the top 10 influencing trends for 23-24, which are derived from this more granular framework. Each of the 4 macro cultural trends has a number of underlying emotional needs and behaviours that can explain the why and the why we desire that food and beverage trend manifestation itself. Some feel very familiar because they're ever present, others have emerged or evolved more recently. Often, though, they're not completely new. When we delve back into the depths of time, we can see that this is a cyclical driver. It's often repeating itself, and Amelia is going to speak more to this particular area of the trends framework shortly. As I've mentioned today, I'll introduce the top 10. This has been developed by analysing where these trend manifestations were in 2022 and prior to that, our understanding of the wider social, cultural, political and of course economic landscape and their likely influence, challenge and disruption factor on food and drink over the next couple of years. And what I'm going to do is bring these to life for you in a bit more detail, indicate the speakers that will be talking to these topics in more detail, and for Trend Hub subscribers, pointing you in the direction of the supporting resources and assets on the Trend Hub platform. But to provide you with a short introduction, here is the top 10 trends for 23-24 in film form.
Cost of cooking. We may only be at the advent of the cost of living crisis, but it's already having an impact on home cooking and food service alike. Hence, thrift and frugality are in and flashy shows of wealth are out. But help is at hand in the form of retailer initiatives, influencer recipes, techniques for cutting food waste, and affordable menus. Precious energy. We've become acutely aware that we could no longer afford to misuse the world's precious resources, and the current geopolitical situation, resulting in sharp rises in energy prices, has further highlighted energy vulnerability. With the cheapest unit of energy being the one you don't use, everyone from consumers to retailers, suppliers and farmers is finding ways not just to save energy, but to create it too. Back to basics. Sometimes you have to look back in order to look forward. Faced with inflation and global instability, people are turning to the reliable wisdom of tried and tested methods of yore. Farmers return to old regenerative farming practices. Preserving, pickling and fermenting prevent food waste. And there's a return to sensible, healthy eating. New climate, new crops. Extreme weather events have been devastating for growing conditions, so growers and producers are adapting to new climes as best they can. Globally, more drought-resistant crops are gaining favour, and, in order to reduce reliance on corn and wheat, hardy pulses, ancient grains and indigenous crops are being championed. PHYGITAL world. The world has embraced digital ways of doing everything due to the pandemic. As people return to normality, they're taking the best of online and physical experiences and fitting them together in seamless consumer journeys. From live-streamed retailer videos with product information and digital displays at point of sale, to metaverse play and NFTs that translate to real-world benefits. Precision fermentation. This is truly an exciting time for food development, with scientists creating viable, near-identical, and sometimes improved proteins and bringing them to market quicker than we could have imagined. This old technique turns microorganisms into mini-factories producing proteins that are genetically the same as animals, but don't involve the rearing or slaughter. Real and recognizable. Consumers are increasingly getting their nutritional advice from doctors and scientists rather than influencers, moving away from magic bullet cures towards common sense healthy eating that everyone understands. As concerns around artificial sweeteners grow, consumers look to naturally sweet foods, and, in general, the unrecognizable and artificial is rejected in favour of minimally processed. Mamma mia! In times of uncertainty, people lean towards what they know. And if there's one cuisine that embodies simple, satiating goodness, it's forever favourite Italian. At home, it's all about cooking up unfussy, flavour-forward pasta and risotto. In food service, Italian trattorias are popping up, serving pared-back, home-style fare. Beige comforts. Purse strings are tight, but food is a pleasure people aren't willing to give up. Indeed, it's often the budget-friendly beige staples that offer comfort when the going gets tough. Many are turning to their go-to, bread, as the humble sandwich goes gourmet. And let's not forget about simple, versatile toast. Consumers are also leaning into familiar favourites like porridge and mac and cheese. Perfect patisserie. Fans of classical cooking, rejoice! French patisserie and viennoiserie are firmly in fashion. As well as being delicious, proper French pastries are near impossible to replicate at home, making them an affordable luxury out and about when budgets don't allow for blowout meals.
So, having seen the film, let's talk about the top 10 in a little bit more detail. And the first of the top 10 that I'd like to talk about is cost of cooking. It sits as part of the megatrend cost of feeding, and it's rooted in the cultural driver, unlock time and money. At the time of recording, overall inflation in the UK was about 10.2%, with costs in energy at 20.2% and food at 14.5%, which are obviously driving these headline inflation figures. We're also seeing similar inflation rates across the G20 nations and in other parts of the globe too. So this is very much a global phenomenon. Food, oil and water have always been the levers of global control, and currently they are ever more so. This is therefore driving behavioural action and intervention in order to survive. Food is an essential. It's inevitably therefore at the forefront in the drive to economise in these tough economic conditions. And so it's becoming ever more focused on delivering economically appealing options. And we're only at the advent of this cost of living crisis. And while the inflation rate is set to plateau and slow through 2023, this will be in the wake of what is likely to be a fairly hard winter, with energy bills, food price rises, and cost of borrowing remaining high for some years to come. Goods have become more expensive and or smaller, so i.e. shrinkflation, to cope with higher production costs. There's a shortage of affordable labour in food service and agriculture. Hence, frugality and thrift are in, and flashy shows of wealth are out. For Trend Hub subscribers, there's a huge amount of exclusive content on the big squeeze and the cost of living crisis on Trend Hub. So how is this manifesting? as I've said, lots written about this in the predictions pack, but 3 areas that I wanted to call out. One is creative cooking. I think the cost of living crisis is sparking a glut of creativity, clearly within constraints. Packed lunch is firmly back on trend for kids and working adults alike. Social media cooks are swapping out expensive ingredients for cost-efficient counterparts. They're also helping out with meal planning to cut food waste. Our family dinners are being prepared for under £8, £5, £2, even £1, with the help of pantry staples, frozen additions, and also seasonal ingredients. Dump dinners involve just a few ingredients thrown in a slow cooker, a skillet, or a pot. The chicken pozole on the right-hand side of the screen is a really good example of that. Batch cooking and cooking in bulk are gaining much wider appeal. Pantry foods are now lauded for their affordability in hashtag store cupboard cooking recipes and other hashtags that we're seeing in a social context. Cooks are reining in spend through technique, switching off ovens but turning on the microwave, the egg poach, air fryer, or air cooker. And Poppy O'Toole's going to be talking more to this trend later on. Then we've got don't chuck it. Waste not, want not rings truer today than ever before. Cue what we're calling scrappy cooking, the return of the sniff test and things like doggy bags. The global food waste issue is not just an environmental problem. The cost of living crisis is adding momentum to the zero waste movement, as needs must for many newly facing food poverty. Major cause of binned ingredients that many supermarkets have axed best before or use by dates on fresh produce such as milk. And more influencers sharing creative recipes that use up offcuts, leftovers in this scrappy cooking. And not confined to the home kitchen, Spanish government, as an example, have created a new law whereby restaurants are required to offer a doggy bag to diners. And many retailers have pledged to sell more wonky or stunted fruit to help alleviate waste in the field. Also wanted to call out budget dining. In recessionary times, eating out is one of the first luxuries to be cut, but a new wave of restaurants and chefs are embracing a creative freedom with the likes of things like all tasting menus, fixed seating times, more sharing style dishes, repurposing waste, things like nose to tail. We're seeing more fish heads on menus as an example, smaller portions, and many more initiatives to help manage costs within the hospitality environment. Have a look at what James Cochrane at 12:15 is doing. Some of his dishes, and one of those is on the right hand side of the screen there: crisp hash brown, oyster emulsion, leek and seaweed, or barbecue, carabito, goat kofta, pickled shallots, pumpkin seeds, and soft herbs. Just 2 of the dishes on that 5-course taster menu for £40. On the wine menu, we're looking at alternatives, consumers considering Corpinat over champagne. Many Eastern European countries offering more bang for your buck when it comes to wine, more wines from the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Croatia, to name a few. And on the format front, we're seeing more half bottles, which obviously reach maturity faster than their bigger counterparts, making them cheaper and more accessible. So look out for those as well. There's lots happening within cost of cooking to explore within the higher level framework. The second of the top 10 that I'd like to talk about is precious energy. It sits as part of the mega trend, what waste under the cultural driver treasure planet. As we're more clearly seeing the physical effects of global warming, we're learning to respect and treasure all elements and products of the earth, many of which are unseen, overlooked, or previously not valued. With food and packaging being an immediate and relevant product to create, it's no surprise that people have not only accepted but welcomed food that eschews waste, food that conserves and enriches the land and the sea. But this also includes energy. A dramatic increase in the cost of wholesale gas has put pressure on the energy industry and very much exposed the cracks that exist in that space. Wholesale gas prices have increased some 250% in 2021, with limited supply and increased demand following a particularly cold winter last winter across Europe, pressure driven by post-COVID rebound and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We've become acutely aware that we can no longer afford to misuse the world's precious resources. Current geopolitics has highlighted the fact that key commodities are concentrated in a few parts of the globe, and they're definitely not infinite. From food to fuel, every part of the Earth's bounty needs to be treasured and treated with respect for our own food security as much as the planet. And players in the food businesses are using things like agritech to process waste at source, harness gas from biomass, as well as solar and wind. Again, many strands of this detailed in the master prediction pack, but 4 that I wanted to call out. First is renewables. Many food and beverage businesses are now turning focus towards investment in renewables such as solar, wind, geothermal. McDonald's Net Zero Restaurant Blueprint's a great example of that, and their Market Drayton restaurant is partially powered by solar panels or wind turbines, and the building cladding is crafted from recycled IT equipment and household appliances. Then we've got things like biogas. Waste is an inevitable part of some parts of our food and drink production, but waste inherently contains energy within it. Energy that some businesses are processing and harvesting using things like anaerobic digestion to power factories and supply the local grid. Many of you will be familiar with White Farms, very well known for its cheese. The waste of the production of this famous cheese is digested into biogas to power the factory and also the local community as part of its Green 100 plan. Also emerging, albeit off a smaller base, you've got things like sailboat logistics. Imagine, I'm sure you're all sitting there with a cup of tea or coffee. Imagine if that had been transported all the way from Colombia, if that was coffee, not in a giant container ship, but a sturdy sailing vessel only using wind power. That's the vision of a company called Transatlantic Wind Transport, a new cargo company, a French-based cargo company that's now scaling up to transport tens of thousands of tons of cargo per year. And lastly, we've got agrivoltaics. Plants and panels can coexist in a symbiosis. We've got next generation solar parks that enable energy and food production as well as water conservation to work in synergy on the same plot to help solve solar's growing land use issue. And for many crops, the panels actually help protect the harsh or help protect them from harsh sunlight, wind, rain and pest damage as well. The third that I wanted to talk about from the top 10 is back to basics. It sits as part of the megatrend cost of feeding, but it also comes through in accessible health and invest in earth as well. Our brains are very much hardwired to maximize exploitation of the physical environment. Times of comfort and excess, such natural impulses are suppressed, but in times of economic and environmental stress, they become activated, and they can dominate thinking on an individual and everyday level. Human beings have for millennia had a special relationship with the land, and one of the key drivers of environmentalism has been the idea of reversing the destruction of the earth in quite literal terms. So here we're returning to the reliable wisdom, the tried and tested methods of the past, farmers going back to regenerative farming practices that work with the land. The shocking issue of food poverty contrasted with an agricultural surplus has brought back common sensical solutions such as gleaning, as well as things like preserving, pickling, fermenting, in times of plenty. So we're going back to basics in our approach to diet with a return to more moderated, sensible, healthy eating. Again, there are many, many layers to this that are detailed in the granularity of the predictions. But 3 that I'd like to call out. First is longer lasting. So that's getting the best of the season, extending life by preserving and drying, but also rediscovering the pantry and freezer for nutritionally dense convenience and choice. Think about the successful freezing of bread and cheese and milk to mitigate waste. That's things that have become much more popular in recent times. For the more adventurous and chefs, we continue to see more fermenting, things like garums, pickling, with those highly umami but also sour flavors. And on the right, you see a restaurant example from Sixpenny in Stanmore in Australia. You've got a mead vinegar custard with frozen raspberries, preserved strawberry consomme. That kind of really brings that to life in a dining context. Something else I wanted to call out, we've got gleaning. This is about resurrecting an ancient practice. It's about harvesting surplus crops to distribute it to those that are in need. It was common in biblical times up until about the 18th century. Now a growing number of volunteer groups are taking to the fields once more to harvest leftover produce that the automated harvesting process leaves behind that would otherwise just go to waste and decompose in the fields. And the picture on the right hand side, you see volunteers from Hale in Cornwall gleaning cauliflowers from the fields. And the last point I wanted to call out in Back to Basics is the need to regenerate. Regenerative farming practices continue to gain momentum. It very much focuses on outcomes of the entire ecosystem. Regenerative agriculture restores the ecosystem that it's grown in, and it's defined by the creation of beneficial ecological outcomes. It has to have a net benefit to the environment by doing things like integrating livestock and mimicking nature with things like high impact mob grazing, but then having long recovery periods, minimizing soil disturbance with no-till agriculture to maintain soil coverage and integrity. It also it's about driving plant diversity with things like rotational lays, companion and cover cropping to maintain a healthy root structure that will improve things like water infiltration, biodiversity and carbon sequestration. These practices are now moving from primary to added value supply chains. The example on the right is from regenerative meals make wild hare. But the likes of McDonald's and other retailers and multinationals are considering and evaluating the benefits of taking a regenerative approach as we move from more sort of top-line regenerative practices to actual on-farm measurable benefits. The fourth of the top 10 that I'd like to talk about is new climates and new crops. It sits as part of the mega trend, invest in earth, and is rooted in the cultural drive of treasured planet. As we're more clearly seeing the physical effects of global warming, we're learning to respect and treasure all elements, products of the earth, many of which are unseen, overlooked, or previously not valued. There's no denying the impact of extreme weather and climate change, frost, flash floods, wildfires, hailstorms, and drought. All these and more are having a catastrophic impact on growing conditions. So growers and businesses look for ways to combat and adapt. So growers and producers need to adapt to these changing conditions. So they look to new alternative indigenous hybrid and drought-resistant crops. I think we know now that there's vulnerability in the few. Over the course of human history, scientists believe that humans have cultivated more than 6,000 different plant species, but over time, farmers with all the best intentions have gravitated towards planting those with the largest yield. So today, 3 crops, rice, wheat, and corn, provide nearly half of the world's calories. And that reliance on a small number of crops has made agriculture vulnerable to pests, plant-borne diseases, and soil erosion, which thrive on monoculture. So monoculture being the practice of growing only one crop at a time. And it's meant losing out on the resilience other crops show in surviving drought and other natural disasters. And farmers across the world are rediscovering ancient crops and developing new hybrids that could prove more hardy in the face of drought or epidemics, whilst also offering important nutrients as well. Ancient varieties that are climate friendly, things like pulses, are being championed more widely, as well as ancient grains and indigenous crops like incorn, taro, amaranth, fonio. The example on the right hand side is a beer brewed with the highly drought resistant West African grain fonio. It's a food that's low in glycemic value, it's gluten-free, and a great source of amino acids as well. Another example would be Robusta coffee beans. They tolerate high temperature or higher temperatures, environmental temperatures, than the traditionally more sought after Arabica. And so we see Robusta shaking off that instant coffee grade stigma and being used in products like the ready to drink cold brew on the right hand side there. Also, we've got hybrids. Farmers and scientists alike are experimenting with hybrids, new cultivated crops that are likely to be better equipped to withstand climate change. Things like kernza, a perennial grain that's been developed and adapted for agricultural farming by the Land Institute of Kansas. Kernza is already beginning to be commercialized, and the example on the right-hand side is a Kernza pasta from the Patagonia Provisions website, which is worth having a look at in its own right. The fifth of the top 10 that I'd like to talk about is PHYGITAL world, and it's rooted in the cultural driver displace and distract. A reaction to bad news is to escape, to seek comfort, safety, and indulge. In the modern world, it's also becoming increasingly normalized for technology to blend with the person, and so increasing the move towards blending the digital reality of food and our appreciation of it with the food itself. The world has embraced digital ways of doing almost everything in recent years, in great part due to the pandemic and its associated restrictions, taking the best of the digital experience and fitting it into our physical lives, from click and collecting, store and delivery, from virtual restaurants to metaverse play and NFTs that translate into real world benefits on and offline are connected and what are becoming seamless consumer journeys. With the rise of things like TikTok, online content is more democratic than ever before, and recipes go from on-screen to plate only to be hacked and sent back out again as user-generated content. There's one thing you can't do online at the moment, it's east, but creators are launching their own virtual restaurant brands and making shoppable videos, getting even closer to that physical experience. And there's a whole megatrend chapter on the PHYGITAL world, but three areas that I wanted to call out and highlight for you today. First one is make it meta. The metaverse refers to a 3D virtual reality world where users interact via avatars. There are many metaverses, from Roblox to Fortnite to Facebook's Horizon worlds. Wendy's, Coca-Cola, Chipotle, and Moss Burger all have a metaverse presence where fans can interact with the brand in new and fun ways. Gaming is naturally a key manifestation of the experience, and you can often play for rewards that can lead to real-world benefits, such as be the first one to try a new menu, or NFTs as an example. They can then be bought and sold on digital marketplaces and often connected to real-world perks, such as exclusive events or launches, and outlets such as Dominic Ansell's Bakery, Glenfiddich, Coca-Cola have all been experimenting with this as well. Fast food chain Chicken Cone is using NFTs to raise capital whilst it opens new locations, and rather than the shares, investors get royalties from franchises who subsequently open in locations that the investors backed when they bought the NFTs. The example on the right-hand side is the first legal Taco Bell wedding, complete with all the dancing and after party in a virtual context that you would expect from a wedding. Then you've got screen to plate. TikTok continues to inspire home cooks with quick and easy recipes. The platform offers a daily mill of fast-moving, fast-evolving fads driven by user-generated content, encouraging interaction and fun exchanges. But also things like hacks, twists like butter boards, 2, 3, 5 ingredient recipes, new cuisines, even scratch cooking and equipment hacks for things like air fryers and freezers, you'll find that user-generated content as part of screen to plate on platforms like TikTok. Who knew that freezing could transform a Kinder Bueno? And obviously we've got Poppy O'Toole, who's speaking more to this particular phenomena later on. And the last one to call out here is virtual restaurant. The virtual brand restaurant model has turned the concept of hospitality and restaurants in its conventional sense on its head. Celebrities and influencers have catapulted it forward. What's the secret of a successful restaurant business acquiring over 1,000 locations and counting in the space of 2 years? Well, a popular and actually non-food related YouTube channel and access to someone else's kitchen. So says Mr. Beast Burger, that you can see on the right hand side of the screen. The virtual brand model is disrupting food service. We're talking here about restaurant concepts with no physical dining locations and operating solely out of ghost or host kitchens. Another example is the content creator Larry. He's got 40 million TikTok followers, who launched mac and cheese brand Larry's Loaded Mac and Cheese as another example. The sixth of the top 10 that I'd like to talk about is precision fermentation. It sits as part of the megatrend food odyssey and is rooted in the cultural driver treasured planet. Whereas once the fusing of human, animal, or plant with highly synthetic technology or methods would have raised eyebrows among the general populace, today's younger generations are not only digital natives, but also synthetic natives. One important development in how people consider the value of the laboratory and research and development is in the rapid success of things like vaccines developed throughout the COVID-19 crisis. These synthetic biological products have given the whole notion of science and tech being fused with the organic a significant boost in both in profile and appreciation. Almost if it works for COVID, why not everywhere else? With food being much more of an immediate and relevant product to create, it's therefore no surprise that people increasingly welcome that synthetic element onto their plates because of the clear environmental and ethical benefits. Milk, cheese, coffee, palm oil, even sugar and salt, the essentials on most shopping lists are being called into question with the knowledge of the toll that they may be having on the planet or indeed our health. And this is a truly exciting time for food development, with scientists creating viable, near identical, sometimes even improved versions and reaching the market perhaps sooner than we could have imagined. I'm deliberately not going to talk here about cellular agriculture, as we've got Ira Van Ellen talking about this later in the programme. Businesses like Impossible Foods, Perfect Day, Melly Bio, Nature's Find, Mighty Drinks, Formo, these are just a few of the dozens of businesses championing fermentation to make greater strides in the alternative protein sector, particularly when it comes to milk, cheese, eggs. It's the ability to manipulate the flavour of an ingredient and in turn the product that it forms into practically anything desirable. It's what makes it so attractive, I guess. Apply that principle to alternative proteins. Imagine if you could find a way to use microbes, bacteria and common plant-derived ingredients to make them taste alike meat or fish or dairy. That would be, well, I guess the world would be your fermented oyster, as it were. 3 types of fermentation: traditional, the type that we've been using for millennia to produce beer and miso and yogurt. Biomass fermentation, which uses the high protein content and rapid growth of microorganisms to efficiently make large amounts of protein-rich food. Corn's a really good example of that. And then precision fermentation, which is what this is all about, where microorganisms such as yeast produce specific functional ingredients. The microorganisms are programmed to be almost tiny production factories. It enables the manufacture of specific proteins, enzymes, flavor molecules, vitamins, pigments and fats that are, to all intents and purposes, nature bioidentical. Significant dairy applications in this area. This is where you create bioidentical animal proteins like casein and whey without using the animals to produce the dairy identical milk, cream, yogurt, cheese. It's animal free, but not dairy free, if that makes sense. While it's yet to receive UK regulatory approval, products are already on sale in the US and in Singapore, plus Remilk is building the world's largest precision fermentation site in Denmark. Trailblazers, Perfect Day have collaborated on things like ice cream sandwiches, nutritional powders, chocolate bars and flavoured milks. They've even set up their own biology innovation arm to support companies with their expertise and technology. And you can see an example of that ice cream sandwich on the right-hand side of the screen. I think it's important in this context for us to consider beyond dairy and what's next. And this technology absolutely can be applied across many food sectors. In fact, it's already been prototyped in areas like honey and coffee and chocolate and eggs, as well as animal fats, even lobster, just to name a few. So the 7th of the top 10 I'd like to talk about is real and recognizable. It sits as part of the megatrend accessible health and clean and whole, and it's rooted in the cultural driver health-wise. Humans are struggling to make the right decisions to become healthier. So there's an increasing emphasis on accessible ways to improve health through food. Human behavior is resistant to change, and health is often seen as a loss in experiential benefits or experiences. More than ever, we're seeking new, clever, easier, less expensive and arduous ways to change habits to increase health and longevity. As scientific and technological activity aims to radically extend the human lifespan, food is becoming more focused on empowering people to live longer as well as more energized lives. Consumers are now getting their nutritional advice, perhaps less from social influencers, more from science and doctors, and proven sources. There's a move away from perhaps magic bullet cures and towards common sense healthy eating that everyone understands, such as eating more vegetables and more fibre. As concerns around low-calorie artificial sweeteners grow, consumers also look to naturally sweeten. In general, the unrecognisable and artificial is rejected in favour of minimally processed or cleaner label. Again, you'll find 2 whole chapters dedicated to this in the granularity of the framework in Clean and Whole and Accessible Health. But 4 areas I just wanted to call out. One is unprocessed. Scientists and nutritionists are educating consumers on the negative impact of ultra-processed foods. Our bodies find it easier to absorb the energy from these calories that these foods contain, causing many to overconsume, which is why processed foods are considered one of the key drivers of obesity, something which is of increasing concern to organisations such as WHO, who recently predicted that obesity may soon overtake smoking as the main risk factor for preventable cancers. More emphasis is being put on better processing, removing unrecognisable ingredients, increasing the fibre and protein content to keep consumers satiated for longer, as consumers become more conscious of ingredient lists. Sugar alternatives. Previously, those worried about blood sugar spikes and calorie consumption would have turned to low-calorie artificial sweeteners. There's a growing, I think, distrust around some of these within food and beverages, there's some scientific evidence indicating that sweeteners may be harmful to health. A slew of recent studies reported in mainstream as well as industry media and in social media have linked the consumption of artificial sweeteners with elevated blood sugar and a raised risk of heart disease and stroke, as well as altering our gut biome, potentially causing weight gain and some other health issues. A really proactive example, the one on the right-hand side from Mars, the triple treat range made with date paste raisins for a natural sweetness. Then we've got Easy Gutsy, the importance of our guts on our physical, mental, respiratory and digestive health, of course, has been thrust into the spotlight over the past few years, with new research consistently hitting the headlines, linking our gut microbiome to other aspects of our overall well-being and a vast range of different diseases and conditions. Whilst the importance of gut health may be gaining momentum, the unique terms, the language, the often higher price tag, funky taste or unusual formats have made them very much the preserve of the health-conscious consumer alone. However, we're starting to see that change as we're seeking out gut health and seeing that become more accessible than ever, with pre and probiotics being added to different convenient solutions targeting specific audiences. Also look out for accessible TV series supporting the debunking of gut health, such as the Mac twins, Lisa and Alana, launching their gut busting series early in 2023. And obviously they're part of our program today, so they'll be talking more about that specifically. Then we've got good fats, with TikTok awash with fatty trends such as flavoured butter, butter boards, and daily shots of extra virgin olive oil, along with the popularity of the keto diet, which shows no sign of abating. The health benefits of high quality fats in diets remains firmly in the spotlight. However, it's not simply about including fats in your diets once more, but consumers are seeking out those quality cues from their fats, such as grass-fed butter, single estate olive oil. The example of Truly on the right-hand side, a grass-fed spreadable butter on the right-hand side there, really good example. The 8th of the top 10 that I'd like to talk about is Mamma Mia. It sits as part of the mega trend humble hero and rooted in the cultural driver, unlocking time and money. In the face of the cost of living crisis, people look for ways to make their money go further without giving up on the enjoyment of food. If there's one cuisine that embodies simple, comfort, satiating goodness, it's the forever favourite Italian. Consumers double down on this cuisine, but play with recipe hacks, ingredient twists, and the rustic trattoria inspiration. There are many factors that make Italian so popular and ever so especially relevant just now. Quality, simplicity, but also affordability, associations with family and belonging, accessibility, as well as comfort. as well as, of course, the Stanley Tucci factor. Italian is satisfying on a physical and emotional level. It's often perhaps a dish or a series of dishes whose aroma and flavors trigger waves of safety and nostalgia. It's usually something that's warm and hearty, lots of carbohydrates, as with some other foods, increase serotonin levels in the brain and produce that immediate calming, comforting feeling. So, Mamma Mia, Italian has so much relevance and is manifesting in so many ways. We expect it to be increasingly omnipresent. Chefs continue to get on board with its mass appeal, with this mass appeal cuisine. You've only got to look at the number of openings in the capital, but also in other towns and cities around the UK. Sparrow Italia from LA opens in London. You've got Notto, Phil Howard's affordable pasta, that's very recently opened. You've also got Jamie's delivery-only pasta brand, Pasta Dreams, which has recently launched. And look out for Officia, Double O, Paper Moon and Big Mama in 2023 as well, from an openings perspective. Also hacks like, cooking and how to cook and measure pasta using pasta water as an ingredient, making Parmesan and Parma ham crisps, one-pot cooking, like the example on the right-hand side, the tortellini with mortadella and peas. It's also about going big on umami. Almost go big or go home. Many affordable pasta recipes are big on umami deliciousness due to its abundance in Italian associated ingredients, things like olives and anchovies, tomato, mushrooms, parmesan, salami, mortadella, guanciale, to name a few. There are many to choose from. It's also about real home-style trattoria food. It's about informality and easy elegance, fewer dishes done well, focus on local and seasonal food. And despite its popularity, there is still newness to be had in some of the hot, recently featured and upcoming food regions of Italy, places like Sicily, Emilia-Romagna, Piedmont, Liguria, Puglia, and Umbria as well. Humble classics with a twist, that things like pork meatballs, but pork meatballs with Induja, white or no sauce pizza, mozzarella and with Scotch bonnet honey I saw on a menu just the other day, chicken parmesan bites, or taking those chicken bites and putting them in a sub roll or a warm lasagna dip as an example. We featured Italian here, but many cuisines have that comfort equivalent. So I think the question is, what's yours? And Shakufa will be talking more to this in the cuisine predictions shortly. The ninth of the top 10 I'd like to talk about is beige comfort, which follows on really nicely from Mamma Mia. It sits as part of the mega trend humble hero and rooted in the cultural driver unlock time and money. In all cultures, there are a set of traditional foods used as foundational references with associated linguistic forms, often baked into everyday language. In England and in the UK, tea serves that purpose, bonding families, oiling the social wheels, and providing that sort of psychological boost with phrases like "it's not my cup of tea," meaning I don't like it, illustrating its place in the psyche. The foundational identity of certain foods and food forms enables them to span the socio-economic strata, meaning that it will have an everyday, mundane version and an elevated, fine version. The sandwich may seem like a mundane and mass market product, but has always found a place in some of the most rarefied and social settings, like in the context of afternoon tea as an example. Simple does not have to mean lower quality. On the contrary, making something humble well can take extraordinary skill. And that's what this is really all about. Elevating and twisting the humble foods to help families create comforting, memorable, and rarefied experiences, but from everyday foods. So first, the sandwich 2.0, the humble sandwich that's often quick, cheap, and a filling formula gets a recession-era treatment, taking it to the next level. The bread and filling combos are in themselves a blank canvas. It's getting the gourmet fine dining flair, twisted childhood favourites, super deep or oversized fillings, hot sandos or toasties. There's also global inspiration here from Mexico, India, Philippines, Vietnam. There are dipped and sauce versions and with signature fills and flavors. I think the Indian example on the right-hand side, or Indian-inspired version from the fried chicken example on the right-hand side from Rowdy Rooster in New York is a really great example of this. Then we've got Toast It. Simple, versatile, cheap and cheerful. Toast is the ultimate comfort food, and its addition can take a snack to a meal. Avocado on toast becomes pizza toast, custard toast, ricotta toast, finished with everything from oranges and figs to hot sauces and anchovies. It's from sourdough through to sliced white and twists on toasties and French toast as well. Example on the right-hand side is a really lovely one. Roasted blood orange, maple and ricotta toast serves as a super example. We've also got those forever comforts. Faced with uncertainty, consumers lean into familiar, can't fail favourites that scream yummy home cooking. Think bangers and mash, shepherd's pie, chicken and dumplings, lasagna, sticky toffee pudding. But as they grow ever more upskilled and experimental, home cooks give these dishes perhaps slightly more elevated or chefy twists, adding soy and miso when cooking mince to give lasagna that high umami, mouth-watering makeover. Or fried banana, hazelnut, coconut and toasted quinoa to porridge, the example on the right-hand side being a manifestation of that as well. American classics with a twist continue to have relevance here too. Mac and cheese, cheeseburgers, patty melts, and specific cuisines inspired, applied to American favorites, burgers, fried chicken, that kind of thing, all fitting the comfort call and fleet to favorites that is beige comfort. And the last of the top 10 I'd like to talk about is perfect patisserie. It sits as part of the mega trend around the world and is rooted in the cultural drive of displace and distract. For many global travelers, being tricky due to pandemic, airport chaos, wallet woes, and more. So in lieu of actual travel, people look to be transported to happy places by food. In the hospitality sphere, diners look to be transported to happy places by kicking back in fuss-free French bistro, Italian trattorias. And for those days where a meal out is too much of an indulgence, there's a more affordable all-out indulgence in the form of proper French patisserie and viennoiserie. Perfect patisserie is the perfect trade up or trade down, as it serves as the 2023 recession era cupcake of the time. There's so much happening in this space. We see croissant as a carrier for filling and topping with sweet and savoury fillings, also formed and cut into rounds, such as the brunch sandwich carrier. On the right-hand side, that's the Royale brunch options from Fallow Restaurant, really good example. Also in New York, the sweet cream-filled croissant rounds from Bakery Lafayette have been an absolute sensation since their launch. This is all about the layers. It's all about the craft production, the laminated layers, the precision structures. They're almost hailed as art forms in their own right. Yes, in the form of croissant, but also think millefeuille, Queen Amman, and cannelle as well. It's savoury as well as sweet. It's not all about the sweet fills, but also the savoury with the likes of wild garlic and fennel, or Comté and truffle as an example. The blue cheese millefeuille from New Yard on the top right, again, really good example of that. Swiss rolls, not strictly viennoiserie, but they're also getting a retro makeover with dessert-inspired flavours like caramel biscoff or fudgy brownie, the example from Swiss roll in Singapore, a fitting example. And dessert-inspired will continue to feature in this space given the cultural drive of displace and distract, as dessert combinations directly inspire gourmet fillings, such as matcha lemon or Ferrero Rocher, or apricot and honey with a thyme cream, just all examples from this world that we've seen recently. And we mustn't forget choux pastry in the mix with elevated flavour, decorations and finishing of choux buns and eclairs in both the sweet and savoury, from all taking choux to the next level. So that wraps up the top 10, but as a taster, here are the headlines of 11 to 20 of the top 20 for 23-24. Keeping the waste from the food chain with Don't Chuck It, leaning into the safety and security of childhood favourites with novel nostalgia, safe escapism with fuss-free flavour, forward bistro and trattoria style cooking, educational and informative short-form video and user-generated content in screen to plate, continued reacquaintance of the freezer and pantry for accessible convenience and nutritious food, continued growing awareness of the importance of soil and the health of it in an optimal food system, loving the overlooked with the flavour of older and retired animals, so Collier, ex-dairy, cow burgers, retired ducks we're seeing, freeze drying and dehydrating returns as a low a low-cost, nutritionally dense, just add water proposition, proactively taking control of your longevity with century-old dietary and lifestyle practices, and finally, flavor bombs, boldly experimenting with big flavor, next level umami with sweet and salty, otherwise known as swatty. Everyone who's participating in today will be able to access the top 10 trends video and the downloadable top 10 trends infographic, as well as links to all of today's presentations, replays at the end of the live broadcast today. In the meantime, thanks for listening. I hope that you found this thought-provoking. I hope it sparked some thoughts, ideas, and made connections. And for Trend Hub subscribers, I invite you to explore the detail of the 23-24 predictions with the various chapters, the online trend book, and the supporting videos from today. So thanks for listening and enjoy the rest of the summit. And I'll leave you with just one question, and that is, how are you shifting the future of food and drink? Thanks for listening.